Shri Gurubhyo Namaha children, let us continue with the remaining portion of the lesson, the enemy. In the earlier classes, we just saw the conversation between Dr. Sado with the general, and the general had agreed to send assassins to kill this prisoner of war, the American boy who was there in Dr. Sado's house. But days were going by, one day after another day, the assassins had not come to the house to put an end to this American. So Dr. Sado had a different thought in his mind. Let us continue to see what he is now going to do with this American prisoner of war. So we just saw that he was there in the this American prisoner's room, and then he was talking about his health, and then he found out that he was fit enough to move out. You are well, Sado agreed. He lowered his voice. You are so well that I think if I put my boat on the shore tonight with food and extra clothing in it, you might be able to row to that little island not far from the coast. It is so near the coast that it has not been worth fortifying. Fortifying, building fort. It was a very small island, and when you want to construct a fort, you have to see to it that the fort is so safe and it will not be easily affected by enemies. But it was not a such situation there in that island. So Dr. Sado, he speaks to this boy Tom, and he says that you are so well, you have gathered all strength once again, you have recovered completely. So if I give my boat tonight and with extra food and clothing and water, you can row to that nearest island, and staying there you can wait for some fishing ship which would come over there and you can escape as such. This is the idea of Dr. Sado. Now Dr. Sado, as a doctor, he had treated this prisoner, okay, and directly this prisoner has not done any harm to him, and moreover with all this hardship, he had escaped and he just recovered back. So he didn't want to give him away to the police. And moreover, he too had taken steps with the help of the general. The general assured him that he will send assassins to put an end to this American. But still nothing happened. So there is something, hope that this man is not to die that particular moment, and he has got a longer life. And so Dr. Sado also decides he doesn't have a mind to put an end to him. He didn't want to hand him over to the police. So he says that if I give you my boat tonight with extra food, clothing and water, you can just move away from here, from this island. You can go to the smallest island, the nearest island. And from there you just go in any of the shipping boats. You can leave this place, he says. Nobody lives on it because in storm it is submerged. But this is not the season of storm. You could live there until you saw a Korean fishing boat pass by. They passed quite near the island because the water is many fathoms deep. Fathom is nothing but the unit for measuring the depth of water. So he says, since it is very deep near the coast, the Korean fishing boats used to come very close to the coast of this island. The young man stared at him, slowly comprehending. He is understanding slowly. First, initially, he didn't know what Dr. Sado was intending. But now he understood that Dr. Sado is now preparing to help him to escape from that particular place. Do I have to? He asked. So he didn't complete it fully. So do I have to? What does it mean? He is asking whether I should leave this place. I should leave your house. He is asking that. I think so, Sado said gently. You understand, it is not hidden that you are here. Then he said, I think so. It's time for you to leave because Now many of them know, the government also knows that you are here, the general knows that you are here. So it is not safe for you to be in this place anymore. That is what Dr. Sado tells this American prisoner. The young man nodded in perfect comprehension. Okay, he said simply. Comprehension, understanding. So he very clearly understood what Dr. Sado was trying to tell him. Sado did not see him again until evening. As soon as it was dark, he had dragged the stout boat down to the shore, and in it he put food and bottled water that he had bought secretly during the day, as well as 2 quills he had bought at a pawn shop. So stout, strong and thick. So he jumps into action. Now when he says that this person has to go from his home to the nearest island, he has to give him all he needs. So what he does is, he takes his boat and then he fills his boat with food, water, quilt for him, then another set of clothing, everything, and he checks whether his boat is quite good enough for him to row to the nearest island. All these things he does during the course of the day. So he goes to a pawn shop. Pawn shop is nothing but a pawnbroker shop. They sell things as well as you can pledge and get money from a pawnbroker shop. So he goes there and he gets 2 quills from the pawn shop, and that also he keeps it in his boat. The boat he tied to a post in the water, for the high tide was high. There was no moon and he worked without a flashlight. So there was high tide, so in fear that the boat may be washed deep into the sea, he just tied it to a post. There was no moon, but still Dr. Sado worked in darkness. He did not use a flashlight. When he came to the house, he entered as though he were just back from his work, and so Hannah knew nothing. So he pretended as though he came back in the evening, late evening, and Hannah had thought that he had gone for his work and he was coming back, and he neither told her anything nor she asked or knew anything about what Dr. Sado was doing the whole day. Yumi was here today, she said as she served his supper. Though she was so modern till she did not eat with him, Yumi cried over the baby. She went on with a sigh. She misses him so. So she talks about Yumi. So the moment doctor came and freshened him up, she gave him dinner. As a custom, she never used to have food along with him. She used to have food only after Dr. Sado eats. So the same way she was waiting that day also for Dr. Sado to complete his supper. And as he was eating, she was telling about Yumi's visit and how she was crying over the baby, how she was missing the baby. All these things she was explaining to Dr. Sado. The servants will come back as soon as the foreigner is gone, Sado said. Sado just said one sentence. All the servants will come back once again once the foreigner leaves the house. He went into the guest room that night before he went to bed himself and checked carefully the American's temperature, the state of the wound, and his heart and pulse. The pulse was irregular, but that was perhaps because of excitement. The young man's pale lips were pressed together and his eyes burnt. Only the scars on his neck were red. So, he was checking the condition, physical condition of this prisoner, whether the wound was okay, whether he can withstand going away from that particular place, and what was his pulse, heartbeat and all those things. and he was okay. Only thing, his pulse was a bit fast because of the excitement that he is going to leave Dr. Sado's house and he is going to escape. And there would have been an excitement that he should not be noticed by anybody till he rose to that particular small island. And the scar only on his neck was red in color, which was a little bit raw. I realize you are saving my life again, he told Sado. Not at all, Sado said. It is only inconvenient to have you here any longer. Inconvenient, something that causes trouble. So the American prisoner was telling, you are saving my life once again. Earlier he saved him by pulling out the bullet from his body and then conducting surgery and then giving him medicine every day, providing food for him and talking to him about the physiotherapy exercises that he has to do, and he has to stand, walk, and all the instructions which he had given to him earlier to make him feel stronger and stronger, and checking to it that he is gaining strength because someday or other he has to be given away. Now he says, it's not that I am saving your life, I am just making it comfortable for me because your stay in this house is very, very uncomfortable. We are finding it very, very difficult. This is what Dr. Sado said. He had hesitated a good deal about giving the man a flashlight. Hesitated, thinking twice or thrice whether a task has to be done. A good deal about giving a man a flashlight. Flashlight is nothing but a torch, but he had decided to give it to him after all. So then he thought, okay, what is there, I will give it to him, and then he can give him instruction how to use it, whether to use it or not to use it, or use it only in case of emergency, and so on. It was a small one, his own, which he used at night when he was called, and it was a very small flashlight which he personally used when he had to go and attend to any patient during night time. If your food runs out before you catch a boat, he said, signal me 2 flashes. At the same instant, the sun drops over the horizon. Horizon, you know, if you are in a shore, you can see the horizon is the place where the water and it is an appearance, and the sky meet, where the sky and the earth appear to meet. That is horizon. Where the sky and the earth meet. That is horizon. Then he says, at that time you give me 2 flashes, I will arrange for your food. Otherwise, don't use the flashlight during darkness, he says. Do not signal in darkness, for it will be seen. If you are all right but still there, signal me once. Then he says, if everything is fine for you and you are still in that particular island, you give me 1 signal. You will find fresh fish easy to catch, but you must eat them raw. A fire would be seen. Then he was telling the American, you will get lot of fresh fish, but you have to eat them raw, because if you are going to cook, the fire will be noticed, because that island is very close to the main island. Okay, the young man breathed. So, lots of instructions were given by Dr. Sado to the young man, and he was taking so much of precaution in saving this young person. So, ultimately this prisoner, he agreed to all the conditions that was set by Dr. Sado. He was dressed now in the Japanese clothes which Sado had given him, and at the last moment Sado wrapped a black cloth about his blonde head. So, he was in a Japanese costume. In case somebody looks from a distance, somebody walking by, looking at the costume, they may think that he is only a Japanese. Then he just gave a black cloth to cover his head as well. Now Sado said, The young American, without a word, shook Shadow's hand warmly and then walked quite well across the floor and down the step into the darkness of the garden. Once, twice, Shadow saw his light flash to find his way, but that would not be suspected. He waited until from the shore there was one more flash. Then he closed the partition. That night he slept. So what happened? Now Dr. Shadow gave a signal to the young American to leave that place. So he just started moving out of the house. He just flashed once or twice the torchlight to find way, and ultimately he was gone. You say the man escaped? The general asked faintly, not enthusiastically. So he was a little bit upset. The general was upset because he had promised Dr. Shadow that he will send assassins to murder him, but he didn't do that. Now the doctor came and told the general that this person escaped from the house. He had been operated upon a week before, an emergency operation to which Shadow had been called at the night. For 12 hours, Shadow had not been sure the general would live. The gallbladder was much involved. Then the old man had begun to breathe deeply again and to demand food. Shadow had not been able to ask about the assassins. So what happened? Actually, the problem was the general also had health issues. So Dr. Shadow was called suddenly to perform a surgery for him because the gallbladder was giving lot of trouble. And after that, he had a doubt whether this the old general will ever recover. But he did recover and he started asking for food once again. And so in this condition, Shadow could not ask him about the assassins. Shadow had not been able to ask about the assassins. So far as he knew, they had never come. So he knew pretty well that the assassins never came. So he never wanted to ask the general as well. The servants had returned and Yumi had cleaned the guest room thoroughly and had burned sulfur in it to get the white man's smell out of it. When you burn sulfur, you will get pungent smell, somewhat rotten smell. Okay, so Yumi did not want to have the smell of this American inside that room. She went to the extent of burning sulfur in that room so that the smell of the white man is totally removed from there. Nobody said anything. Only the gardener was cross because he had got behind with his chrysanthemums. Cross means angry. Chrysanthemums is a type of flower because he was not able to raise that now. But after a week, Shadow felt the general was well enough to be spoken about the prisoner. Yes, Excellency, he escaped, Shadow now said. He coughed, signifying that he had not said all he might have said, but was unwilling to disturb the general further. But the old man opened his eyes suddenly. That prisoner, he said with some energy. Did I not promise you I would kill him for you? Signifying here means indicating. So, Shadow didn't want to tell completely all the information because he cannot say that he had prepared a boat for him and then stored it with a quilt, dress, food, water and then made him to escape. No, he cannot tell that. He can only say that that prisoner, he escaped. And since the general did not open his eyes, he just stopped giving an indication. And then he coughed and he gave an indication and then he stopped. But suddenly this general opened his eyes and he was asking, that prisoner, didn't I promise you that I will kill him for you? He was asking. You did, Excellency, Sado said. Well, well, the old man said in a tone of amazement. Amazement, surprise. So I did. But you see, I was suffering a good deal. The truth is, I thought of nothing but myself. In short, I forgot my promise to you. So the general was telling, yes, I promised you. But you see, I was thinking about myself. I was suffering a lot. I had so much of ailment. As I was suffering a lot, I did not have any other thought of just recalling the promise I had given you. This is what the general said to Dr. Sado. I wondered, Your Excellency, Sado murmured. It was certainly very careless of me, the general said. But you understand it was not lack of patriotism or dereliction of duty. Dereliction, deliberately not doing what one ought to do. Okay, that is what you mean by dereliction. So he was telling, it is not that I am not patriotic towards my own land, or I just want to wash away my responsibility and not do purposely, deliberately something. He says that. And he just adds, I was very careless. And that is also a reason why I totally forgot about the promise I made for you. And why did the general make such promise? He was just thinking about the consequences. Suppose Dr. Sado is going to be arrested and put behind the bars, or if he is going to be executed, and the very next moment if he gets a pain and he has to undergo a surgery, then he never had any belief or any a positive attitude towards the German trained doctors. Okay, so he wanted only Dr. Sado to operate him. That was also a selfish reason he gave here, that he will send assassins to murder the prisoner. Certainly, Your Excellency, he looked anxiously at his doctor. If the matter should come out, you would understand that, wouldn't you? So he is asking, suppose the matter comes out that the American prisoner escapes and all those things, won't you understand what would happen? Certainly, Your Excellency, Sado said. He suddenly comprehended that the general was in the palm of his hand and that as a consequence he himself was perfectly safe. So, consequence, result here. So, Dr. Sado now understood very clearly that the general was in his hands. Everything that he has to do for the general only he has to do for the general. General's health is not good. Now, so in that case, Sado is very safe. He is in a very safe hands, as well as the general is now under his control. I can swear to your loyalty, Excellency, he said to the old general, and to your zeal against the enemy. Zeal, enthusiasm. So he was, in fact, what was the enthusiasm now here? General has recovered and the prisoner has escaped. No problem for anybody. You are a good man, the general murmured and closed his eyes. You will be rewarded. Then he added, you are a good man. So that is the reason that you have saved me also. And you were so honest enough to come and tell me that you had a prisoner at home. You revealed everything to me. Only we know that he had told only partly. But still, the general had so much of faith in Dr. Sado. And so he was commenting like this. But Sado, searching the spot of black in the twilighted sea that night, had his reward. There was no prick of light in the dusk. No one was on the island. His prisoner was gone, safe doubtless. for he had warned him to wait only for a Korean fishing boat. So he waited whether there was any flash of light. There was no flash of light. So he was able to understand that there was a Korean fishing boat which had come there nearby, and he was gone once for all. He stood for a moment on the veranda, gazing out to the sea from whence the young man had come that other night. Whence? Where? It's an archaic use of word. So he was standing and looking at the sea. So this is a place from where that American, so all the thoughts is ringing in his mind once again. He stood for a moment on the veranda, gazing out to the sea from whence the young man had come that other night. And into his mind, although without reason, there came other white faces he had known. The professor at whose house he had met Hannah, a dull man, and his wife had been a silly talkative woman, in spite of her wish to be kind. He remembered his old teacher of anatomy, who had been so insistent on mercy with the knife, and then he remembered the face of his fat and slatternly lady. So slatternly, untidy, insistent, demanding. Slatternly, untidy. So, the thought of other Americans with whom he had his acquaintance. So, he was thinking about one after the other, his anatomy professor, the landlady, his wife, like that. So many people he is recalling. He had great difficulty in finding a place to live in America because he was Japanese. The Americans were full of prejudice. What is prejudice? Unreasonable dislike that you develop towards a person. And it had been bitter to live in it, knowing himself their superior. So he feels that it was very, very difficult for him to live in America because Japanese were superior, but they were not treated properly in America. They were treated with so much of dislike. Living in America was very, very problematic for him. He couldn't get a home to live in. So much of problem he faced there. How he had despised the ignorant and dirty old woman, despised, hated. Who had at last consented to house him in her miserable home. Consented, agreed. To house him in a miserable home. Miserable, horrible, depressing. Anything you can say, because it was not a happy home for him, or it was not a happy place for him to live there. He had once tried to be grateful to her because she had in her last year nursed him through influenza. Grateful, thankful. He showed his thankfulness towards her because she helped him in treating him when he was very sick, when he was down with influenza. Influenza is a kind of flu fever. But it was difficult, for she was no less repulsive to him in her kindness. See, the same strong feeling of dislike she also had towards Dr. Sado, who was an American. Now he remembered the youthful, haggard face of a prisoner. Youthful, very young, haggard, tired due to illness. This prisoner had suffered a lot, so he was very, very tired. So in that case, now at the end, this white prisoner's face also came in front of Dr. Sado. White and repulsive. He also had a dislike towards his prisoner. He did not like him. But the instinctive feeling of a doctor made him to treat him. And the patriotic feeling that he had towards his own country made him to send away this prisoner. But as well as some strange kindness he had in his heart that made him not to hand over this young youthful boy in the hands of the police. And that was the reason why he made him to escape from that particular place. The title, The Enemy. Japanese and Americans are enemy. An enemy came to Dr. Sado's house. Dr. Sado, as a doctor and as with the instinctive feeling of a doctor, he treated him and he performed surgery for him and he made him recover. But as a faithful and true patriotic Japanese, now he has to hand him over to the police. But there was some strangeness in his feeling which made him to make this prisoner escape. Might be so many Americans with whom he had been acquainted earlier. The American lady who helped him, who took care of him when he was sick. All these things might be the reason which made him to save this fellow. As well as his American prisoner, that is a professor of anatomy who had taught him. All these also might be the reason which made him to save this prisoner and made him to escape. Now we have come to the end of the lesson, children. To receive the updates, please press the subscribe button. Thank you.